powerless to help. Yazan Abu Fil, 2-year-old. Mr. President, this is the reality. This is the grim reality that the Israeli authorities want to conceal. This is why international journalists are banned from Gaza. This is why Palestinian journalists are deliberately targeted and assassinated. 245 of them have lost their lives. Late August, the IDF, Israeli Defense Forces, deliberately killed 6 journalists. They carried nothing but the word, but the image, and they raised nothing but their voices. The word, this very Security Council did nothing after this crime. And so, the Israeli occupying power repeated the same pattern. This Monday, the day before yesterday, at Nasser Hospital, 5 more journalists were killed, were assassinated. Among them was Maryam Abu Daqqa, a young, a beautiful mother. She was 33 years. Her armor was her press vest. Her weapon, a camera. A few days before, she wrote on X a letter to her 13-year-old. His name is Ghaid. In this letter, she left words that carry more weight than any official statement. And I quote, "Right, you are the heart and soul of your mother. When I die, I want you to pray for me, not to cry for me. I want you never to forget me. I did everything to keep you happy and safe. And when you grow, when you marry, And when you have a daughter, name her Maryam, after me. Mr. President, will this council persist as a theater of lamentation, endlessly echoing speeches, while Gaza burns for lack of actions? This council must act as a matter of duty, a moral duty, a legal duty, must act to impose a ceasefire and protect and save innocent lives, must act to ensure unhindered humanitarian access at scale, must act to feed the starving and break famine. To fail is to be complicit. To delay is to accept shame. Yes, shame. To stop a genocide is not an option. It is an obligation. I thank you.
Agradezco.
I thank the representative of Algeria for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Guyana.
Thank you, Mr. President. At the outset, I thank Assistant Secretary General Masuya and Mr. Alak Barov for their briefings. I also thank Ms. Ashing for her perspective and Save the Children for the work they continue to do under extremely difficult circumstances, and commend Ms. Ilana Grzycki for her bravery today in sharing her horrific experience with us. No person should be made to endure such an ordeal, and we remain ready to work with fellow council members to bring an end to the suffering of all civilians who are experiencing suffering on account of the protracted Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Mr. President, the past few weeks have been marked by several extremely troubling developments in the occupied Palestinian territory, further compounding the plight of the Palestinian people and deepening the present conflict. Among those developments was the declaration of famine in the Gaza Governorate by the Integrated Food Security Phase Classification IPC, with Deir al-Balah and Khan Yunis governorates projected to experience famine in the coming weeks. The conditions imposed by Israel, including severe restrictions on the entry and distribution of humanitarian aid throughout Gaza at scale, and the void created by systematic dismantling of the humanitarian system in Gaza, have contributed in no small measure to this growing humanitarian catastrophe. In addition, the failure to find a resolution to the present impasse between the parties cannot be discounted. The aggregation of these factors has exacerbated the catastrophic humanitarian situation in Gaza, causing a purely man-made famine to take hold. Children are suffering the most, their small bodies wasting away from lack of food and nutrition. Guyana calls on the United Nations, including the Security Council, to exercise its responsibility to protect innocent Palestinian civilians who are suffering the indignity of dying from starvation. Mr. President, another element of concern is the fate of professionals operating in Gaza, or the denial of their entry into Gaza to render life-saving support. Doctors and other medical personnel have been unable to access visas to enter Israel. Many medical personnel have also been killed and injured in attacks on hospitals. Journalists continue to be fatally attacked, including during Monday's horrific attack on the Nasser hospital. We condemn these actions in the strongest terms and underscore that humanitarian workers and journalists are protected under international humanitarian law. We therefore call on the Israeli government to ensure their safety, to investigate the circumstances surrounding the death of those killed during the hostilities in Gaza, and for all perpetrators to be brought to justice. Mr. President, the situation in the occupied West Bank, including East Jerusalem, also remains a point of grave concern for my delegation. Illegal settlements continue unabated, accompanied by violence, displacement, and dispossession. The recent decision to advance the El Settlement plan represents another grave threat to the two-state solution, specifically the contiguity of the Palestinian state. We are also concerned by the direct attacks on Palestinian livelihoods in the occupied West Bank. We have noted, for example, the 29 documented settler-related attacks between 12 and 18 August, at least 23 incidents involving damage to Palestinian-owned property. These attacks destroyed nearly 700 trees and vines, mostly olive and grape, which were uprooted, cut down, or burned alongside the torching of an animal barracks and the vandalism of a water network. What purpose do these actions serve but to further impoverish Palestinians? We call on Israel to abandon its colonial settler policies and practices, which are a source of great oppression to the Palestinian people. Mr. President, allow me to conclude by reiterating the following appeals. First, we reiterate our call for an immediate, permanent, and unconditional ceasefire in Gaza. Second, we call for the immediate and unconditional release of all hostages still held by Hamas and other armed groups in Gaza. The taking of hostages is a war crime, and Guyana condemns such action in the strongest terms. Many families are rightfully distressed over the continued captivity of their loved ones, and the parties to conflict must prioritize the safety and well-being of these individuals. We are equally concerned about the ongoing and arbitrary detention of Palestinians in Israeli jails and call for their release. Third, we call on Israel to lift all restrictions on the entry and delivery of humanitarian assistance throughout Gaza to ease the massive suffering of the civilians. Finally, we call on fellow members of the Security Council to work together to bring a swift end to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and to offer international protection to the Palestinians. A just and comprehensive solution to the conflict must involve Israel's full withdrawal from the OPT and the implementation of the two-state solution. It is our duty to ensure that this is done. Guyana remains prepared to contribute to these efforts. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Guyana for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of the United States.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Deputy Special Coordinator Alak Barov, Deputy Emergency Relief Coordinator Masuya, and Ms. Ashing for your briefings. And thank you, Ilana Grudzuski, for your testimony today and your courage. It reminds us how this war began and why it persists. It is also a reminder that this Council and the United Nations as a whole have failed in their mission. They would do well to listen to voices like yours and learn from what you have been going through. Colleagues, the path to a better future in the Middle East is clear. It starts with freeing Matan and all 50 hostages who remain in captivity nearly 2 years after October 7th, 2023. It means ensuring that Hamas, a barbaric terrorist organization, never controls Gaza again, nor poses a security threat to Israel. The United States continues to work tirelessly to accomplish all those objectives while supporting humanitarian assistance to innocent people in need. We cannot expect peace as long as Hamas is a ruling force in Gaza that is threatening or attacking Israel. It is no coincidence that talks with Hamas fell apart after several countries, including members of this Council, announced their intention to effectively reward Hamas for the massacre by recognizing a Palestinian state, all while hostages are still being held in subhuman conditions. Hamas officials have even said that unilateral recognition is one of the fruits of October 7th. The United States continues to focus on the real and important tasks at hand, not conferences, but serious diplomatic efforts and providing humanitarian assistance in a war zone where a terrorist organization uses aid as the basis for its terrorist machine. Mr. President, we all recognize that hunger is a real issue in Gaza and that there are significant humanitarian needs which must be met. Addressing those needs is a priority for the United States. However, we can only solve problems with credibility and integrity. Unfortunately, the recent report from the IPC doesn't pass the test on either. One of the report's key authors has a lengthy record of bias against Israel, including openly justifying the Houthis' terrorist attacks on Israeli civilian targets. By his own measure, he ought to have recused himself. This helps explain why the normal standards were changed for this declaration, raising significant questions. We can spend no shortage of time pontificating and lecturing, but we are here to solve real problems affecting real people, and the only way to do that is with credibility and integrity. Colleagues, President Trump wants to alleviate the suffering the people in Gaza are experiencing at the hands of Hamas and has prioritized getting aid to people in need while implementing safeguards to prevent Hamas from looting. As of August 26th, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation has delivered more than 140 million meals